Good afternoon. Happy New Year, although we're almost done with January. This is our first program activity of 2021. My name is Takiwa Smith. I'm the founder and executive director of Science, Engineering, Mathematics Link Incorporated, and I want to welcome you to our Math and Science Career Academy STEM in the City workshop. The purpose of our STEM in the City workshop is to expose students to earth and environmental sciences. And those are branches of STEM that impact our everyday lives. The earth, the quality of air, water, all of those things. And so we wanted to make sure that we focused on those and that you had the opportunity to meet those scientists. Sometimes those are also the scientists that do work outside. And sometimes when we think about STEM professionals, we think about somebody in a lab or in a lab coat. And a lot of earth and environmental scientists do field work. So it's important that you all get to learn who those scientists are, what they do, and if that's something you're interested in, you can pursue that. So that is why we have the STEM in the City workshops. So I am going to turn it over to our program coordinator, Carlin Pounders, that is going to introduce today's speaker.
Hi, everyone. Today's speaker is Shandrea Stallworth. She is the fifth-year doctoral candidate at Mississippi State University, where she studies weed science with a focus in physiology and genetics. Shandrea is a three-time recipient of the MSSGC NASA Fellowship, where she focuses on enrichment in STEM programs within the K-12 school system, while completing her dissertation in the utilization of weed species to discover stress-tolerant traits for rice breeding program improvement. Shandrea is a strong advocate for increasing diversity in the STEM fields and has served on many committees to address the need to provide more opportunities for minority women in agricultural areas. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Shandrea.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Takia and Carlin, for having me. I'm so happy to be here. I know I'm going to tell you guys right now, I'm super excited about STEM. I love what I do. And I am probably going to be overly excited. I'm going to go ahead on and apologize. But hopefully the excitement gets you interested in what I'm studying and it exposes you to a different light of what weed science looks like. So what I want to introduce to you first is that on this slide, you'll see my information. There is a QR code that will take you directly to my LinkedIn. Feel free to follow me, add me as a friend. If there's anything that you ever need help with, please let me know. I am always available as a resource. The next thing on this slide that I wanted to call you guys' attention to is that in my bio, I highlighted that I want to bring an increased diversity within the STEM field. That was one of the goals as I came to Mississippi State University. Mississippi State is a large university. We do characterize it as a predominantly white institution, which just means that the majority of the students that attend the college are of the majority when we think about race. So then when we start to dig into that, I came to my department and soon realized that I was the first PhD student that would graduate from the department in more than 20 years. It can be a little shocking. It surprised me, but I didn't let that steer me away. I was actually more excited to go to Mississippi State because I just wanted to change the face of agriculture. So this image is very near and dear to my heart because after being awarded the NASA fellowship, the university reached out to me to do a photo shoot. And they wanted to use these images as stock images. Little did they know that that was actually one of my goals coming to the university, to be able to have stock images that actually reflect the amount of diversity that is present within the department. So here, this is one of the images that they did choose to use for media purposes. It does say that the National Science Foundation ranks MSU in the nation's top 5% for agricultural sciences and natural resources and conservation, a position it has held for over 2 decades. So then that is very important to me because that that means that they're allowing my face to be seen and letting individuals and stakeholders know that they are changing diversity and they are trying to actively recruit minority students. So now we're going to jump into this presentation. So just a little background information about me. For undergraduate, my undergraduate studies, I attended Fort Valley State University. It's a small HBCU in Georgia where I studied plant science and biotechnology. And then I moved on. I took a little time off. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do, if I wanted to go to graduate school, because that is a big jump. You have to be very much invested and you have to be able to have some strong time management skills. And after a couple of years of working, I worked at T-Mobile as an assistant manager selling cell phones. I decided that it wasn't for me. So then I moved on and applied for graduate school at Auburn University, where I obtained my Master's of Science in Plant Breeding and Genetics. And during my master's, I was recruited to Mississippi State University, where I've been for the last 5 years, working on my PhD in weed science and genetics. So the first thing that I like to introduce is that we are not talking about the illegal weeds. We are talking about these pesky little plants that like to grow in your yard. They like to grow through the cracks in the pavement. We usually apply some type of herbicide to kill them. And that is what my focus is on. So then moving on, as you can see, these are just a couple of the photos from when I graduated from undergrad. These are my beautiful parents here. They have been a part of my support system. And then in the other photo, this is my best friend and my aunt, both of which are both now doctors. And this was during my master's program. So we had both graduated with our master's degree from Auburn University. So then what do we see that's missing? While I shared my support system, we haven't talked about internships, work experience, I mentioned T-Mobile, and professional development. But how did I get to where I am now? So the first thing that we cover is internships. While I was in undergrad and even in high school, I started taking on internships. I needed to figure out what it was that I wanted to do and what it was that I was passionate about. So in one photo, I am receiving my biotechnology certification that says that I am able to go into a lab and perform these different assays or experiments to the best of my ability. We have some photos of me in the greenhouse where this was my first time working with herbicides and it was my first application. And little did I know that, 5 or 6 years later, I'd actually be in a weed science discipline where it became a part of my day-to-day life. And a part of those internships is giving presentations, getting comfortable with talking with people, being able to communicate my research in hopes of getting people excited about what it is that I do. And then lastly, being able to intern with larger corporations. So the bottom photo is my summer internship cohort where I was with Dow AgriSciences, which is now Corteva AgriScience. And as you can see, the goal here is to increase diversity. And if you look at that photo, you'll see little old me in the front. I had to make sure that I was front row and center because I didn't want to get lost amongst my other peers. So then as we move on, we look at work experience. What else did I do? While I did intern, I also completed a co-op, and co-ops are opportunities for you to actually work at a company while you're still enrolled in school. The company pays you, and you're able to get the experience that you would need to be able to leave school and go on and secure a job. So during that co-op, I worked at Robins Air Force Base. Again, I was focused more so on science. So this was an opportunity for me to actually look into being an industrial hygienist. As an hygienist, I actually worked with planes and made sure that the individuals that did work on those planes followed all of the safety protocols that were outlined for them, such as making sure that all their chemicals are in the right cabinets. If they are going to be dealing with chemicals, I was in charge of the chemical data sheets to make sure that the information was easily accessible for the workers, and again, making sure that they abide by all health and safety concerns that may be out there. And then additionally, I worked part-time. I worked at T-Mobile while I was in undergrad. At the time, I was just a part-time associate. And I also worked in the research lab at Fort Valley. So these opportunities gave me a chance to really explore what it is that I wanted to do. So a lot of you might say, but T-Mobile selling phones, what does that have to do with plants? Well, it's interesting because I had to talk to people and I had to sell them phones. And that actually comes into play when you're doing research. If you want to get money for research, you have to sell your vision for this research. So it was actually a great opportunity to be able to work on my public speaking skills, to work on interactions with individuals, and also improve my professional development. So then we move into professional development. And like what I'm doing here today, in that first photo, you'll see these while I was in undergrad and during my time at Auburn, I actually worked with a organization called Manners. And that organization is Minorities in Ag, Natural Resources, and Related Sciences. And what I did with them was I served as a mentor. I worked with our junior manners, which are our high school students. So in that first picture, we're actually talking about matters and talking about how to manage your funds, and we had a game that we gave them where they had a set amount of money and they had to go to different stations and figure out how they were going to allocate their money. In another picture, we also do diversity recruitment. So I've manned a lot of booths, talked to a lot of people, something that just came a lot more natural to me. And then additionally, as part of being with Manners, I was also a national officer, both as a Region 3 VP, and then last year wrapping up my year as the national graduate student president for the organization. So these times were ways that I was able to get in front of people, get in front of stakeholders, get in front of people like you, and be able to talk about what it is that you need to succeed. It's not always about, we talk about science and math, but a big part of that math is, can you manage your money? Do you know what happens when bills are due? And I think that it's very important for students to be exposed to that at an early age. Additionally, there aren't a lot of women in STEM. So being able to be a Black woman and actually talk to students was something that I was really excited about. And I'm grateful for the Manners organization for giving me this opportunity to do so. So then how do you take all of this and make it work for you? That's what we're going to talk about here. So I came up with this acronym that I like to call Be Iconic. And when we talk about being iconic, we want to be intentional, we want to be confident, we want to be able to network, we want to be informative, and we want to be creative. So how did I use this iconic acronym to move forward in my career? In being intentional, I made sure that I applied for fellowships. I applied for internships. I applied for scholarships, travel grants, and I set goals for every opportunity that I took advantage of. And while being intentional, I was able to formulate these friendships with individuals that even to this day, I can pick up the phone, call them. If I have questions, they're able to help me. In this picture, you have a mathematician, you have two engineers, you have a computer scientist, and then you have me, and we are all a part of Greek organizations. And so these were ways for us to strengthen our bonds. As we talk about these fellowships are free money. You can get fellowships in high school that allow you to earn money and experience, and you don't have to pay for anything. Additionally, when you get ready to go to college, you can use those fellowships, which are free money, to pay for school. And you don't have to take out any loans that a lot of us are having to pay back now. Additionally, with internships, while I was in high school, I interned with a doctor's office because I had this bright idea that I wanted to be a doctor when I went to school. So in order for me to be sure that I wanted to be a doctor, I put myself in a doctor's office. I quickly learned that I didn't want to be a doctor. For scholarships, there are so many scholarships that are available to students, especially our minority students. And when we say minority, if you are the only one doing what makes you happy, you are a minority. If you like to go outside and study the cracks in trees and you've never met anybody that studies cracks in trees, you're a minority. And I guarantee that there's somebody out there that wants to give you money to study cracks in trees. So find those scholarships that speak to your passion, they excite you, and they also give you money that you can have in your pocket so you don't have to be a broke college student. Additionally, these travel grants are opportunities for you to go abroad or to go to different schools. You can have presentations. There are leadership academies. While I was in high school, I took advantage of a travel grant, and it actually was a summer program that I went to North Carolina A&T University. I stayed there for 6 weeks, and I took math and science classes to advance myself so that one, I wouldn't have to take those classes when I got back to school, and two, give me a leg up so that I was actually a little bit more prepared when I did have to take classes. So always be intentional in planning out your next steps. Next, you want to be confident. How are you going to be confident? Do you have SMART goals? Are you able to plan? Do you tell yourself that you've got this? I always tell people I am who I am. I rarely introduce myself as my name is Shandrea. I have been here long enough that my name is who I am. There's no one that can take that away from me, and that you're going to associate my name with the goals that I've set and the things that I've accomplished. And the goals that I've set, I've done so using SMART goals. And SMART goals are questions that you ask yourself as you're developing these goals. Is your goal specific? That's the S. Is it something that you can measure? Is it something that you can, right now it's the new year. So a lot of people, their goal is they want to lose weight. So how do we make this a specific goal? I want to lose 10 pounds. How do we measure those 10 pounds? You're going to step on a scale. What's your action plan? How are you going to accomplish losing those 10 pounds? And so you're going to go to the gym. Is your goal realistic? Well, science says that you should lose 2 to 3 pounds per week. So is it realistic to lose 10 pounds in 6 months? Absolutely. And do you have a time limit? Yes. I'm not just going to float out into the earth and say, I'm going to lose this weight at some point in time. So the same thing has to be applied in school. It has to be applied in your career. It has to be applied in everything that you do. So be who you are, be confident. And when you are confident, you say what you say and you mean what you say. So those last two statements are very important to me. I am who I am, and I said what I said. In getting a PhD, oftentimes we're told that we become the expert in a subject matter. So a part of being that expert is to be confident that you can convey the information and get your point across and be able to say, I said what I said, because who else is going to be able to challenge you when you've done and taken the steps that you need to? The next is to network. To get what you want, you have to reach out and ask for help. You have to attend seminars such as these. You have to find your niche in this world. And then after you do that and you accomplish those goals that you set out for yourself, you have to reach back. You have to be able to remember the things that you didn't have or the things that you did have that really shaped who you are right now, and be prepared to give that back to someone else. When I was in school, I'd never seen a Black doctor. I had no idea that you could be a Black doctor. This was elementary, middle school, and then I got to high school and I had a Black teacher, and I was elated. And when I found out that that Black teacher had all of these accolades, I was shocked. And do you know what that Black teacher did? Took me under her wings and walked me through the door. She gave me all of the tips and tricks that she had to be successful. And she said, if you want to be here, this is how we're going to do it. You know what she did? She reached back. She didn't want me to be left behind. She understood that there were not a lot of women in our field. She later on, I met another woman when I was in undergrad. She was a geneticist, and she's the reason that I decided to go on and study genetics. It's because she took the time to invest in me that I knew that this is what I wanted to do. So in turn, because these women reached back, I turned around and now I'm doing the same. I love to give my time back to students because I remember what it felt like to walk into a classroom and either be the only Black student or the only Black woman, or to be interested in things that nobody else is interested in. And I never wanted to have a student be able to feel that way. So I wanted to be able to give back and reach out and help students, similar to what I'm doing now. So in these pictures, what you see are two of my mentors in the top. And one of them is Simone. She is a beast. I think we're going to see a lot more of her given who our president is. She actually worked with the Obama and Biden administration. And she has just this great passion for minorities in the field, and she wants to see us excel. Additionally, we have Jeremy Adamson. Jeremy is in the ag field. And Jeremy has been the first person that I met when I came into Manners who told me that I was going to change the world. And he said that we have to figure out how to do it. Not quite sure how, but when we get there, we're going to know that we got there. And since then, if there's a job opportunity, if there's a chance to speak, Jeremy is there. He gives me that opportunity, and I'm just so appreciative. And then to reach back in the bottom, what you'll find is that I actually went to Maryland to sit on a panel of young scientists to discuss what does the training program need to look like for young plant scientists who either want to exist in the field and go outside, or they want to exist in the classroom and be indoors and be in a lab. So being able to shape and outline what that would look like over the next 10 years was just such a joy. And that way I made sure that we had some minority exposure and that no minorities would be left behind because I had a seat at the table. Next, we want to be informative. So one of the things of being in STEM that you have to get used to is giving presentations. Everybody is always excited about science, but we don't realize that we have to be able to talk about science. How do you communicate that science? How do you tell people what it is that you do? So what do you know? So I'll give you guys my background. I know plants. I did not grow up on a farm. I'm a military brat. I don't know how I got involved in plants. Well, I know how. I took a class and it was an elective course. It was something to fulfill requirements. And I took that class, and just the applications of what you could do with plants from a holistic standpoint, how they benefit your health, how people, even though we study weeds have such medicinal properties that while we think of them as bad, they're only bad in the environment that they exist in. So that is how I got into plant science. What is it that I know? I decided to focus on weed science. I know that we have to feed 9.6 billion people in the next 20 years. So, in order for us to feed all of those people, somebody has to be out there developing ideas and ways for us to increase the yield while having less and less land to do so. So, it's important for people to be in this field like me because we have to eat. And who can benefit? Everyone benefits from the research that I do. I work with rice. Rice feeds more than 20% of the world population. If that isn't an impact, I don't know what is. Before I got into my research project, I didn't take a second look at rice. I thought all rice was created equal. And then I found out that there was a weed in rice that looked just like it, but it cost people money. And if it costs you money, it's a problem. And a lot of times that money is taken out of the pockets of our Black farmers. So, how do we improve rice breeding, educate our Black farmers, and help them excel? So, that is the purpose behind my research. I actually try to uncover ways that this weed can actually improve the rice that we eat. And I do this through looking at genes. And so when you're being informative, you want to be able to talk to people like this and get them to see the bigger picture. Because trust me, I have a lot of people who hear me say I'm a weed scientist and they're like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. And then when we start talking about it, they're like, I had no idea. I need to pay more attention to the plants and the weeds that we have. What do we do? How do we do it? And then even more, being able to get NASA to understand the importance of this. Who would have thought that NASA was already doing research about growing plants on space stations and being able to move that into growing plants on Mars? And that is how I became a fellow. You had to think out of the box on ways to be informative and get them to see your research and why it's important. And thankfully, they did and found a reason to fund my research and give me opportunities to talk to people like you all. Lastly, in being iconic, you want to be creative. This is a photo of me at a conference in Hawaii. They wanted us to take a selfie. They were giving away $25 Amazon cards. I put on everything. I wanted to be the one that stood out, and I wanted my personality to come out and come across to people. So what you see here is me being creative. They had all of these different props. I made my own costume and I took a few photos, and this is my personality. So in being creative, never be afraid to be yourself. You are your strongest advocate. You are your own best friend. You are your shoulder to cry on. If there's anything else that you ever wanted to be you 100% unapologetically. Be different. Don't be afraid to go out and study that major that makes you happy. Don't be afraid to go to the library and try classes. We have classes in coding that we have students from the age of 4 all the way up to 16 who are learning to code. I was never one that wanted to code, but the way that they're teaching it, I can't help but be a coder. And I never saw myself doing that. And be bold. Don't be afraid to step out and be yourself. You are, you have something that the world needs, and all it takes is being bold to figure out what it is, ask questions, reach out, ask for help. And if you do all of that, you will be the best version of yourself. So, in all of that, I want you guys to remember to be iconic. And then I'll take a pause in the presentation right here. I don't know if there are any questions, comments, concerns, anything about that first half before we jump into our activity. All right. Oh, and I am seeing you guys' comments here, so I'm going to go through and kind of answer a couple of them. Hello, everyone. It is important to be able to communicate with people and even get their support on your projects, because if no one supports you, there will be no money. It is so important to collaborate. You never know what it is that you have that somebody needs. And if the two of you can come together, you can double the amount of funds that you get. It is good to be intentional in planning. Hello from Mississippi. I see Atlanta. It's like my second home. Um, for those SMART goals, for that worksheet that I found, you can most definitely find these online. They have them in depth. They have them simple. So you can start SMART goal planning with toddlers and getting them ready to get ready to go to school, all the way up to adults. I have a big whiteboard that I have my SMART goals written on that tells me what it is that I need to accomplish those goals. Let's see. Someone said, I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to change the world. Absolutely. We do have to think about increasing agricultural yield. If you think about it, we have more and more people. Those people have to have somewhere to live. So even though we are expanding the yield of these plants, we have to do it on a smaller base because we have to have people that give them a roof over their head. Yes, NASA is very much involved in the plant science field. I actually almost allowed myself to be discouraged from NASA. I was scared to hear no. I didn't believe that there was any space for me when I heard NASA. I think aerospace, planes, spaceships, where they're not worried about a little old plant scientist working on rice. And then what actually happened is that I attended a conference, a plant science conference, and there was a representative there from NASA to talk about dwarf tomatoes that they were growing on the space station. And I thought, rice is already a dwarf plant. We've already found genes that allow us to make rice dwarf shorter. And so that's important if you're going to grow it on the space station, because we don't have a whole lot of space and limited resources. But the other part that we have to address is that rice grows in water. So how are we actually going to be able to take something that doesn't need any fertilizer, grows in water, unlike a number of plants, and make it produce on the space station? So the fact that they saw and were able to follow my thought process on how we could do that, it was just amazing to me. And I can't believe that I almost let myself talk myself out of that opportunity for those funds and these chances, because so many doors have opened, and the network that was formed just from doing this, it was just amazing. So that is now why I tell people, don't be afraid of no. And even if you feel like there's no application, try anyway. Talk to your mentors, because I guarantee you they can help you see a way to make it happen. Are collaborations essential, even if the fields are different, but have a shared focus? Absolutely. A big part of my research on the back end is computer based. I don't think we heard anywhere in here that I like computers. I was getting ready for this presentation and I was asking Carlin, I was like, how do I stop presenter view? And I can't find my mouse. I like science from the more physical aspect. I like to go out and get in the dirt. I work in a greenhouse. I like to be able to control temperatures and environments. And so I have to have a collaboration with others in and outside of my field because things like statistics, while a lot of times most people will understand if you're strong in science, your math might take a back seat. If you're strong in math, your science might take a back seat. There's nothing wrong with that because that's what collaborations are for. So in my research, I have this long string of letters that had to go into a computer program. Not a computer programmer. I know a little bit of coding. I tried the program and I wanted to hit my head up against the wall. So I reached out to what we call a biostatistician. And they're basically computer engineers. They have their degree in computer science. They focus on building models. And this guy built a whole program to deal with and process my data. If I didn't have that collaboration, I wouldn't be able to present any type of data at any of my presentations because it's sometimes that takes a whole nother degree. And even though it's something that interests me, I'm not passionate about it. And if you're not passionate about it, there's a chance you won't give your all. You won't give 110%. So in collaborating, you have these opportunities to build these relationships and then be able to get additional money, which is kind of like this is a collaboration. In giving this presentation, I met Carlin on a networking call we were doing for Black women in STEM. And she reached out to me, I think that was maybe 4 months ago, and she asked to give a presentation. If we hadn't collaborated and did that program, I wouldn't be able to be here speaking with you all. Let's see. We have, will the science behind what you do benefit those who seek to improve health to get to the root cause of diseases by eating better? Absolutely. So that is one thing, another part of the story that I didn't address on how I went from being a pre-med student to a plant science student. When I got into the pre-med program at Fort Valley, like I said, I was a military brat. Unfortunately, my dad had gotten orders my senior year of high school to go to Hawaii. And while Hawaii is this beautiful place, I didn't know anybody there. I wanted to be able to be in a space where if I wanted to get in a car and see my old friends, I could, and it wasn't 5,000 miles away. So I made the choice after talking with my parents to stay behind in Georgia while they went to Hawaii. But I also knew that I grew up in a more close-knit community being a military brat. Our schools were always with military children. There was a different type of, our parents knew each other because they were all in the service. So then going into a larger university, while the individuals looked like me, I quickly learned that I did long for that more close-knit community. And coming in pre-med, there were 300 plus students who were in pre-med, which meant that you had to really, really stand out. And oftentimes, if you didn't take the time to talk to your professors, they wouldn't know who you were until your junior or senior year. So then after realizing that one, while I was strong in science, I was actually bored with biology, I needed to find something to challenge me, which is when I started taking these unrestricted electives. And I took a plant science course, and we had a program in our plant science department that would allow me to get into a pipeline program to go to pharmacy school. So while I might not be a medical doctor, I could be a PharmD or a pharmacy doctor. Or get a doctor of pharmacy, I apologize. So at that point, I was thinking, well, plants are from the ground. Before we had modern medicine, I think to this day, and I don't know if anybody else still relates, my grandmother, my great grandmother will make me some tea. She still believes in cod liver oil. These remedies that have nothing to do with taking a Tylenol. And so I wondered if I could bridge the gap between the amount of medications that Americans are taking and find a more holistic approach by marrying this with plant science. Can we get into holistic medicine and holistic medical treatment? So that is how I started on this path. And then I ended up switching completely into the plant sciences and gave up on pharmacy school because I actually worked with someone who was getting their master's in public health. And at getting their master's in public health, they were studying epidemiology, and they were wanting to see what would happen if we introduced microgreens, which are like small salad pieces, and getting people more familiar with eating these. Um, so in doing that, I found that I enjoyed being able to correlate the need for increasing agriculture, increasing diversity in agriculture, and being able to feed the world. So in doing that, working with NASA, I started working with the World Food Prize on campus. And what that does is their aim is to essentially change the way that we look at how we eat, whether it be through agriculture, whether it be through machine learning, whether it be through exercise. This all falls under World Food Prize. And when I got into that, I just knew I needed to stay in the ag because it's bigger than what you eat. While we all know about rice, the weed that I study is actually, again, very similar. It takes up arsenic. So in third world countries where they're having a huge problem with this weed, they've started to eat the weed in thinking that there's no issue. But now we know that there are concentrated levels of arsenic in this weed. So you can't eat this weed because maybe 10 years from now, after eating it consistently and knocking rice out of your diet altogether, we might start to see an increase in infant mortality or an increase in high blood pressure or things of that nature as it relates to this whole community switching and eating a weed. So it does all correlate and come together. We work with our family and consumer sciences. If we're just doing basic studies with rice and sweet potatoes and tomatoes, if we haven't applied any type of chemicals, we donate those products to the food pantry and the food banks to ensure that we are giving back as well and not just being wasteful. The last question I have, you mentioned urban farmers. How can we get the science product education to those farmers to benefit Black and Brown communities? That is an awesome question. So the first step is to get more people like us in those fields. History has shown us that our Black farmers are distrustful of the government. And because of that distrust, they miss out on a number of opportunities that are available to them. So things that we've done, and when I say we, I actually have a consulting firm with two great friends of mine where we aim to educate and teach and help, because a lot of times our farmers don't have an education past high school. Some of them don't have education past middle school. In order to get the free money, you have to be able to write. You might not have been given the opportunity to go to school. You might have had to take over the family farm. That's no fault to you. So you can come to people like us and we will write that grant for you. We will sit down with you. We will talk about what your goals are, and we will outline how you can go about getting these funds and being able to be more productive with your farm and able to compete with the majority. So in doing that, if you're able to volunteer throughout your state, there are extension offices. Go be a face. Make it comfortable for our farmers, our minority farmers, to see somebody who looks like them, because they are 10 times more likely to trust if you look like them. So get out there, talk to them. You can start as low as at the bottom with 4-H and start with children and getting their children excited about it. And then their children give on this information. And then the parents start asking questions. And then the next thing you know, you're starting to develop programs that are educating these minority farmers on anything that it is that they need. Don't think I see any more questions. So with that, I am going to, and I hope I answered your questions as best as I could, Ms. Walker. And if there are any more, please feel free to send me an email. They do have my information. I don't have access to the comment section, but I will go back to that first slide that has my LinkedIn information, the QR code. If you hold your phone up to that, that would allow you to connect with me, and you should be able to send me a message and we can connect from that point. So then moving on, we are going to get into our learning activity. And I have titled this learning activity something near and dear to my heart. It is identifying plants' leaves. This is the basis of being a plant scientist, weed scientist, a physiologist. If we can't identify what kind of leaves a plant has, I can't even tell you what family it is, where it came from, who the parents are, is it supposed to be here or not? So, in giving you guys this overview, I hope that you will go outside and start to look at plants through a different lens. So, let's start off. What is a plant? Plants are multicellular organisms in the kingdom Plantae that use photosynthesis to make their own food. So, when we're talking about food, we're talking about sugar, we're talking about the oxygen that we need. So, when we give off carbon dioxide, these plants are taking that carbon dioxide in, they're making sugars, and they're able to thrive. There are more than 300,000 different types of plant species, to include the weeds, and they produce all of the oxygen that we need. So plants are very, very important to us on multiple levels. So what makes up a plant? A huge part of the plant is the shoot system that we see here, and we talk about that being that top portion, the shoot apical meristem. So that's going to be anything that is above ground that we can see. And then we look at the root system, and that's going to be the most important parts because that is where the plant is able to get their water from and bring in nutrients to uptake and grow these strong leaves. So it's going to be our below ground parts. So we see the root apical meristem, we see a primary root, and sometimes we'll have these secondary roots depending on what type of plant it is. So getting into the different types of plants, there are two different types of plants that we start with. We look at monocots and dicots. So our monocots are going to be those plants that are more like your grasses. They have what we call one cotyledon, or one leaf that comes out when they're growing. We call these, or direct this to, a parallel venation. So that's going to be these lines running up and down. They never run into each other when we think about that parallel venation. And then when we think about what happens inside the plants, everything is going to be in a circle, and all of the important mechanisms are going to be right there in the middle of that plant. And then we move on to dicots. So dicots are going to be those more common plants that we see, anything that has nice fluffy leaves, they might fall over. Those are going to be what we call dicots. And they're named that because when they grow, they have two cotyledons that come out. So they're going to open up like this. They often have a netty venation. So if you see in the picture, those lines are going everywhere. It's a complete contrast to the monocots and their parallel venations that don't run into each other. These dicots have a central stem that they run into, and they are able to distribute nutrients going out throughout the plant. And then because they're so complicated, they have many large and small different vascular bundles that are responsible for the nutrients that this plant might need. So then when we talk about this sheath and the leaves that we're looking at, remember we talked about this dicotyledon. And so that's what we're looking at here. We see that this is a geranium leaf. So we're looking at these wavy edges that go to a point. We have this nice little pedial here that attaches it to a stem. We're looking at the blade of this leaf here. So very complicated leaves. But then we compare that to corn. So this is a corn leaf. It has this central stalk here. The leaf wraps around that stalk and it kind of grows out and falls over. It's a very simple leaf. We have that leaf blade. We'll have a main vein. So again, comparing that to the dicot, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different veins coming from that one pedial, where this is very simple. We see that it has a node, and that node is going to allow for individual leaves to come off and grow. And then there's no pedial compared to the dicot, where we see this connection where the leaf comes off of that stem and then gives its own whorl. So then additionally, we look at things like stipules. So these are going to be either little shiny parts that like to come off of the plant here. They can be curly, they can be small. These are going to be small appendages located at the base of some leaves, not all, and they fall off shortly after the plant develops. So they're not needed. They're just an identification piece that allow us to differentiate between different types of plants. So as you can see, and I apologize if this image is small. When I did try to blow it up, it got really fuzzy on me. but we have these curly cues that come here from the base of this leaf. We have a small piece that just looks like a little flap here. If we're talking about our cotyledons, yes. And we do have complex leaf structures in more simple forms. And we're going to look at some of these more complex and simple ones as the slides go on. So just paying attention to that, these stipules can tell us the difference between if a plant is a weed versus if it's the actual crop. So that is one of the differences when we look at rice and weedy rice as it's termed, we look at the stipule. Additionally, we talked about that pedial. So that pedial is going to be the stalk-like base of a leaf, and it's going to be elongated, and then we're going to get the leaf at the end. Not all plants have petials, and these leaves sometimes do attach directly to the base. But again, it's all in being able to identify different types of plants. Then moving on, we look at the leaf blade. So again, these are going to be more closely related to our dicots, because we find that we have these many parts. And I encourage you guys to pay attention, because there may or may not be a quiz at the end. But when we're looking at the leaf blade, we look at the apex is going to be the point right at the tip of that leaf. The outside of that leaf is going to be that margin of the leaf, and those can be different. We're going to review those next. We have this mid-rib or mid-vein here that's going to connect it to the pedial. Again, we're able to see these stipules that are hanging off of the plant, so they're easier to see. And then we have the base of the leaf here. So just a couple of points. Because the blade is the main part of that leaf, it may be flattened, and sometimes they're very thick leaves when you think of things like cactus and other succulent plants, or they may be needles when you think about trees like the pine tree. The leaves can be very simple, so you may only have one blade like corn, or they can be compound in things that we see like soybean. When we talk about the leaf margin, we're talking about what happens when you feel the outside of that leaf. And a lot of times we think about it similar to like a knife. If there are a lot of points and wedges, we call that serrated, versus something that doesn't have any rough edges. It's just going to be smooth. So this is going to be that outer edge of the plant. And as you can see, they can be very small bumps in the plant, very defined, more pointy, or just a round, smooth leaf that we see here. So then as we talk about the different leaf margins, we can also look at different leaf arrangements. So as you can see, these are going to be different shapes of the leaves that then can combine with those margins. Don't worry about the names of the leaves. This is more just an informational piece. A lot of these leaves are going to be leaves that we find on trees. I am not an arborist. The most familiar that I am with any type of leaves is probably going to be this guy right here. But if you think back to what you've seen outside, if you look at the names as they relate, like I said, we have things that are serrated. So you think of a serrated knife versus something that's lobate, where we talk about the lobes of your ears. So those are very lobed or glob shaped. Oftentimes we have a palmate, so it looks like your palm. So thinking of laying a leaf in your palm. So these are going to just be those different leaf shapes. Oftentimes we see the tripartite. This is actually what our soybeans tend to look like with more smoother leaves. So with this, there can be many combinations of leaf types. And then again, we can have these leaf shapes, as we pointed out before. We can have them as skinny as a needle, like a pine tree. We can have them fanned out like we see on our palm trees. We have them shaped like trees themselves. Sometimes they can be heart-shaped. So a lot of thought goes into identifying these leaves. But we also know that these leaves are specific to that type of plant. So anytime that you see a needle, you're going to think, oh, that might be a pine, that might be something, you know, in that same family of trees. So it's always important to study the leaves of these plants. So when we're looking at leaf identification, again, like I said, these are my two favorites that I like to look at. We have a corn leaf, which is a monocot, and as again, we see these long, big leaves with these parallel venations. Nothing runs into each other, versus a soybean, and it has this dicot leaf, very netty venation. A lot of times these leaves in soybeans are very thin, because there are so many secondary veins running through these leaves. and they're very, very dark green versus the corn leaves. They're very thick. You can actually snap a corn leaf apart because they only have that one main midrib that all of those nutrients are concentrated in. So then now I'm going to play a video for you guys, and I'm hoping that you guys can hear the sound. This is going to be our review, and then we're going to go into our pop quiz on the next slide, and I'm going to ask you guys to use the comment box to write down 1 through 6 when we get there. So please enjoy this video.
A leaf is a flat, green structure attached to a node on the stem. The stalk by which a leaf is attached to the stem is called the petiole. The thin, flat and white part of the leaf is called lamina. The lamina is green in color. The thick line present in the middle of a leaf is called the midrib. The thin lines branching from the midrib are the veins. The arrangement of veins on a leaf is called venation. When veins appear to branch from the midrib, the venation is called reticulated venation. When the veins run parallel to one another, the venation is termed as parallel venation. This type of venation is generally found in the leaf of grass.
All right, so after that quick review, I am going to put up a slide for you guys. It is going to have a leaf. So I am going to ask you guys to see if you remember the parts of the leaves that we actually just went through. And I would like for you to put them all in one chat. So if you could label 1 through 6, and I'll give you a few minutes and then we will review those. So I'm going to give you guys about 30 more seconds. Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm hoping we get some answers. Nobody wants to take a shot. All right, let's see. We'll go by one. Let's see if anybody wants to take a chance to put this in the chat. What is number 1 highlighting? What is this that we're looking at? Oh, thank you. Okay. So let's see how well Catherine did. So number 1, we were looking at the type of leaf. So this type of leaf is a dicot leaf. So this is a leaf blade, but when we look at number 2, we are identifying the petiole. So yes, you got that one right. Number 3 is going to be our stipules. So yes, good job. Number 4 is our midrib and midvein. Number 5 is actually the whole blade of the leaf. And then number 6 is the leaf margin. Thank you so much, Catherine, for taking the time to remember those. You did really well, considering that we went over this presentation fairly quickly and you can recall that information. I am very happy about that. That lets me know that we were able to get something done. Yes, those are really good guesses, and I appreciate you for participating. if you are able to send your information, I may or may not have a gift for you. All right. And with that, I did say that I would go back to the beginning of the presentation. So I'm going to flip through real quick. I don't know if my computer is going to let me stop. So I apologize for the repeat of all of this information, but I do want you guys to be able to have my contact information. Again, if you have your phone, if you hold it up to this QR code, it should take you directly to LinkedIn. Although I don't have access to the chat box, if you do want to take down my email is S as in Sam, D as in dog, S as in Sam, the numbers 583 at msstate.edu. You can send me an email, and I really have enjoyed talking to you guys. I think I have a few minutes for questions. So if you want to drop those in the chat box, I will answer them. And thank you so much, STEM in the City, for having me, because this is just a great opportunity.
Okay. Well, really quickly, while you're waiting on people to type their questions in the chat, Carlin is about to put our survey in the chat. So whether you're catching this online or watching it on YouTube later, please take a few minutes in your schedule. And if your parents, help your children complete the survey if you're watching it with them, because these surveys help us keep the funding. I'm sorry, my bad. Things just died. These surveys help us keep the funding to continue to host workshops like this. So whether you're watching it live stream now on YouTube, just take a few moments to complete that survey. I'll bring the color. Okay.
I don't see any questions. But now that I know this is on YouTube, I know that I can go back in and pop in and answer any if there are some. So that is exciting. I'm glad that you guys did this platform.
Yeah. Okay. So I do have one question, and Carlin may have a few closing questions before we wrap up. Fort Valley State, my family's from America, so two of my families went to Fort Valley. And the owner of my farm I get my produce from is a Fort Valley alum, as well as a couple of our good volunteers. So when you were thinking about, and I guess this is the debate, I'm a FAMU alum, how did it is super important that people understand how great STEM education and research comes out of historically Black colleges and universities. And so, Fort Valley State is known for all their plant science and agriculture. How did that experience shape you as you navigated your work and even choosing, to continue, your education in grad school, your path?
Okay. So that is a great question. Great question. Like I said, before I got to Fort Valley, I honestly didn't know anything about Fort Valley. Fort Valley was a last minute, selection for me. And when I got to Fort Valley, I had no idea I was going to one of the larger ag schools in the state. When I got to my department after I made that switch, the first thing that they did was they made me apply for a scholarship. That was important to me because the amount of scholarships coming out of that department, it was just unprecedented. The fact that there was a good chance that I would get a scholarship by simply transferring my major, it alleviated a ton of financial stress because school is expensive. And then when I decided to go into ag, it was after I took my first course and I was awarded my scholarship. And then I learned that as a part of my scholarship, I had to work in the lab 10 hours a week. I had no idea what I was going to be doing, but I had to be in there. And a lot of times when students are put into the lab, some people are very, very timid about new lab goers. They're a little scared. You've got to get acclimated to the lab. We don't want you to, the chemicals alone are things that we need to pay attention to. But one thing that my mentor and advisor did was he put us back in the classroom. So if we took Intro to Biotechnology and there was a lab for Intro to Biotechnology in the fall, if that class was taught in the spring, that was the lab class that you were teaching as a part of your scholarship. So it was positive reinforcement, because if there was anything that I struggled with while taking the class, I got better because I was repeating that process. And then I was also able to share the knowledge that I learned, any tips and tricks that I had, to help my peers. So in choosing Fort Valley, I have to say that Fort Valley chose me, because when they aligned us that way and put us in the classroom and gave us that lab experience, we became more marketable. I didn't realize how many, although I'm at Mississippi State and it is a large university, there were not a lot of students doing undergraduate research. My lab is fortunate enough to get 1 to 2 students every year, but everyone wasn't taking advantage of it. And so everything that I learned in undergrad, I brought with me to my master's program and to my PhD program to better arm our students and give them that experience. I'm the coordinator for our department or our lab for our undergraduate research. So I'm a part of making sure that the projects are hands-on enough, because that's important. A lot of trainings are lacking because we don't give those students that opportunity, but we expect them to know how to do it based off of learning in a classroom. I'm a visual learner. I need to put my hands on it. I need to touch it. I need to see it. And if you're giving me a presentation and you tell me to go learn this information, I'm not going to do well. But if you have a lab accompaniment and you say, hey, this is how you're going to get it done and this is how you do it, I'm going to remember that information, because I'm like, when I was in the lab, I had to use this pipette. And what did I do with that pipette? What was the reagent? I remember the reagent because I'm seeing myself walking through the lab and doing this. And so Fort Valley really, really is responsible for me being here now, because without those experiences, I don't think I'd be as strong of a researcher that I am. Uh-oh, Carlin, you're muted. Okay.
So I love how you mentioned about positive reinforcement. I think that was a really good point. As I was watching you and listening to you give this presentation, like, I was getting excited when you were going through the parts about the leaf. And, I was just wondering, like, if you had any tips for, parents who want to get out and, explore the leaves in depth with their kids, or even any other type of activities that youth and their families can do to explore plant science, particularly before they whether they're like not in school or before they head to college and decide to major in it.
Absolutely. So this is one of my favorite apps that they have available out here. Even though I am a weed scientist, a lot of my research is spent in the lab or in front of a computer. Maybe my first year in the program, we were really heavy on plant identification. There was a whole course on weed biology and identification. But then when you get further down the line, you kind of only focus on your plant and your specific weeds. And it's easy to forget what else is out there. I'm not perfect. Please don't tell my boss. He'll probably give me a quiz if he sees this presentation. But one of the ways that I got more familiar and more comfortable with identifying weeds is using PlantNet. One of the great things about PlantNet is, one, it relies on citizen science. And two, you are using what you already have available to you. You use your camera on your phone. You are able to go outside, you see a flower, or you see a stem, or you see a leaf. You can take a picture of that leaf. You tell the program, hey, I just took a picture of a leaf. It's going to upload it. and it's going to give you every type of plant that has a leaf similar to that. And then if there's flowers on the plant, you can actually say, hey, I also have a picture of the flower. And then it's going to narrow down your goal, your search, to the point that you can then say, oh, that is a daffodil. That's a dandelion. Those are things that, you know, and you start with the things that are most common in your yard. If you're always seeing these dandelions and, you know, the little ones that we usually blow and they go everywhere, we know it's a dandelion. But what are the main characteristics that we recognize from that dandelion? It's the leaves, because they tend to look like they're prickly and they're very spiky. And we notice the head of it, which ends up being the seeds of that plant. A lot of times when we see it, it's closed and it's usually got the green outer and the yellow flowers kind of peeking out. But when it opens up, that's when we get the white parts that float away. And those are the seeds. So PlantNet relies on people like us going outside, taking pictures of plants so that their database becomes more diverse. This is an awesome resource for helping identify plants, and you don't have to be a specialist. Anybody can do this. So if you're going with us, you know, it's COVID, go for walks. And if you see something, you're like, I wonder what that is. Spend time playing with the app, because you never know who you're helping in submitting those photos. Additionally, the University of California has a whole plant database full of photos, the identifying characteristics, what these plants look like at their infancy, all the way up to adults. So if you Google University of California plant management or plant gallery, you can actually go through and see a presentation and look at all of these, click on them, see the photos. So those are two great resources. And I wonder, I think I can pull this one. Yep, this is my photo. These are weed plants. As you can see, this is a resource again for me. I hope it loads. But these are all different weeds that have different photos attached. And they're separated by where you would find them. So if you look in water and you see plants, or if you're looking at, if you're outside, I want to say one of the bigger weeds that we look at and we're like, it's a flower, it's a weed, it's buttercup. This is what buttercups look like in your yard. A lot of people are like, that can't be a weed. It's so pretty. It's bright yellow. When I was younger, I was one of those kids, you know, they told you if you hold the buttercup up, you can see the yellow reflect. Awesome plant. Again, it all depends on where they exist at. So buttercups are a huge problem in turf grass. So think about your golf courses. So that is why we label it as a weed. But this lets you go through and you can see where you can find these different types of plants. They're going to pop up in orchards, vineyards, crop fields, pretty much anywhere that you can have weeds and seeds. You can see what the seeds actually look like. A lot of times we don't look at these seeds because it's all below ground. And then just seeing that these are the identifying characteristics, and you can click on the pictures and they give you closer looks, so that if you were in your yard and you saw these nice little green leaves, one of the things that points it out is a brown speck in the middle. You have buttercups growing in your yard. And it's good to be familiar with this, because yes, I love my job. You can send me pictures of this and tell me, hey, how do I get this out of my job? But if you're a person that doesn't like to talk to people, or you go into Lowe's and you're like, I'm just about to grab some Roundup, it's a good idea to know what you have growing. So if you can identify these weeds, you can go in Lowe's and get your own herbicides. You don't have to call, you know, your maintenance man and your lawn care to come and take care of this, because you're starting to get more familiar with it. Or you can tell them like, hey, I don't know what you put out in my yard, but I know I have buttercups. So when you come out here, can you please apply something that's going to treat these buttercups? Now you're taking ownership of what you're paying for. And they know that they can't get over on you, because it's like, oh, she did her research. Okay. All right. She knows a little bit of what she's talking about. So these are just some ways that parents can incorporate what we did today into everyday life. It is so, I think it's so important. And I mean, if you go to a botanical garden, PlantNet works there too. So even though the botanical garden might only have yellow flowers, they'll tell you what the flower is, and you can see a whole gallery of what these different plants will look like. And that's the thing that I appreciate about it. I live in, Mississippi. The plants that I have here aren't the same as what they have in DC. So seeing the different floras that exist and the different types of plants, it's just amazing to me.
Love it.
Wow, that was great. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who is watching us live and watching us on our YouTube channel. You have taught me so much about weeds, but you also did a great job of telling, us your journey and motivating students, because finishing your STEM degrees and persisting through that career, you need pep talks. So thank you for that motivational component of your STEM in the city. So workshop. So thank you everyone for tuning in.
Thank
And
you.
like I said, whether you are live streaming or watching this on YouTube, be sure to, when you finish, take your survey.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you so much again, Shandrea.
Thank you. I appreciate you all. Thank you so much.
All right.